Welcome to The Explainer. Today we're going to get into a philosophy that is, well, it's pretty out there. It calls for getting rid of nations, money, and even the traditional family as we know it. So let's dive into the really radical and challenging ideas of a writer named Xue Feng.
So where does Xue Feng even start? Well, he kicks things off with a huge critique of modern society, specifically our obsession with success. He's basically saying that the whole self-help industry, with all its advice on making it big, is actually making us lose our grip on reality. It leaves us just kind of floating, and eventually we're all destined to come crashing down.
And he really takes aim at that mainstream advice. The stuff that tells us to counterattack our problems or climb the social ladder. He has this great metaphor for it: toxic chicken soup. It looks like it should be good for you, right? But he says it's actually poisonous, and it just leads people to despair and failure in the long run.
Okay, so what's really at the core of this whole critique? This brings us to the first major pillar of his philosophy, a deep dive into what he thinks is fundamentally broken about the way we live and what we value today.
According to Xue Feng, all this relentless pressure to succeed, well, it has a pretty devastating consequence. It turns our relationships with each other into this cold, transactional game. Genuine emotion, he says that becomes just an illusion, a mask for the chips, our status, our wealth, that we use to size each other up.
But here's the twist. Xue Feng doesn't think this is who we really are. He sees it as a total corruption of our true nature. He argues that deep down, what we all really want is fairness, freedom, and dignity. This messed up state we're in, he says it's a direct result of all these unhealthy pressures from our culture and the market.
So after laying out the problem, Xue Feng starts to build his solution. And it's all built on a brand new foundation, a complete redefinition of our fundamental rights. This is where we pivot from just critiquing the world to actually trying to build a new one.
Xue Feng outlines 8 essential rights, which he believes are given to us by God. And his thinking here is stark. There's no gray area. If you're missing even one of these rights, he says, your very humanity has been compromised.
Now, some of these rights are pretty familiar, right? Survival, speech, we get that. But then you see others like the right to create and the right to migrate freely. But it's that last one on the list that might just be the most radical of all, the right of refusal.
In this right of refusal, it is a huge deal in his philosophy. It basically says that being forced to accept anything, a job, an ideology, a lifestyle, that goes against who you are, is a fundamental violation of your humanity. It's this incredibly powerful statement about individual freedom.
Okay, so with these rights established as the goal, Xue Feng then lays out a practical path for people to follow to get their humanity back. It's definitely unconventional, and it's aimed especially at those of us feeling a little lost in the modern world.
So you can forget about networking events and polishing your resume. For anyone who's struggling, like maybe a recent grad who can't find a job, Xue Feng proposes this 3-step journey to find a life that's actually meaningful, a life that intentionally goes against the grain.
So what does this path actually look like? Well, step 1 is a pretty radical act of simplification. You lower your material desires to the absolute minimum and focus on serving other people, not money. Then you're told to seek wisdom, but not from modern gurus, from historical spiritual leaders. And finally, you have to completely redefine work, not as something you do to get paid, but as a source of joy and life's primary purpose.
This whole path is really guided by one simple but super powerful idea. He calls it reverse thinking. Basically, do the exact opposite of what the crowd is doing. If everyone is rushing to the city, you head for the countryside. If everyone's chasing money, you find your purpose somewhere else entirely.
But here's the thing. This whole individual journey, that's not the end game. It's just the foundation for something much, much bigger. A collective vision for the future of all of humanity. What the author calls the highest civilization.
So, just try to imagine a world without nations. No borders, no laws, no money. And get this, no traditional family structure. According to Xue Feng, these are the very things that cause all the division and conflict in the world. And in his highest civilization, they would just not exist.
So you're probably asking, how would a society like that even work? Well, the idea is that it would be organized into thousands of these small, self-sufficient communities. They're called second homelands, and in them, all property is shared. So in this model, the community takes care of all your needs. But here's the most wild part. Every 3 years, people rotate to a new homeland.
The whole point of this constant movement is to break down any attachment to a specific place or group, and instead create this single unified global identity. A world where things like crime, war, and hunger just don't have a reason to exist anymore.
And Xue Feng doesn't just suggest this vision. He presents it with this absolute, unshakable conviction. There's really no room for debate in his writing. He presents this as the one and only way forward for humanity, a plan that he truly believes is better than any other.
So, what we're left with is this incredible journey of a philosophy, right? It goes from a very personal critique of our modern ambitions all the way to a full-blown utopian vision for the entire planet. It's a world that promises us freedom from conflict and want, but the price is giving up almost every social structure we know. So the final question really isn't just about whether this world is possible, it's whether it's a world we'd even want to live in.